Good morning, Westside. Let's all stand up and sing together this morning as we worship Jesus. All my hope, all my love, all I ever wanted, ever needed. All my heart, all my soul, every day I get, I'm chasing Jesus. I just want Jesus. We've come to worship the Son of God. We bow down to lift up the name of love. We run to the altar and behold the one. Our hands are reaching, no other reason. I just want Jesus. No, I just want Jesus. All my hope, all my love, all I ever wanted, ever needed. All my heart, all my soul, every day I get, I'm chasing Jesus. I just want Jesus. We've come to worship the Son of God. We bow down to lift up the name of love. We run to the altar, behold the one. Our hands are reaching, no other reason. We just want Jesus, no other reason. One who is worthy, one who can satisfy. Come if you're thirsty, drink from the well of life. One who is holy, one who can purify. Come find forgiveness here in the arms of Christ. One who is worthy, one who can satisfy. Come if you're thirsty, drink from the well of life. One who is holy, one who can purify. Come find forgiveness here in the arms of Christ. We come to worship the Son of God. We bow down to lift up the name of love. We run to the altar to behold the one. Our hands are reaching, no other reason. We've come to worship the Son of God. Bow down to lift up the name of love. We run to the altar and behold the one. Our hands are reaching, no other reason. We just want Jesus, no other reason. We just want Jesus, no other reason. We just want Jesus. Yes. Hey, go ahead and turn to your neighbor this morning. Say, good morning.
Hey Westside, Casey here. I got to tell you that I'm so excited for our church family today. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. I'm also excited to have all our guests with us today. If you're new with us, I have two things I want to share with you. First, we have a gift for you. And second, I want to invite you to join me and some of our church leaders at our next Second Sunday. After today's service, we'd love to give all our guests a gift for being with us. When we close, would you please go to our Welcome Center that is located right across our lobby. A host will be there, and they would love to give you a gift for being with us today. And while you're there, they will tell you about Second Sunday on April 13 at 12:15 p.m. Second Sunday is your best next step to connect with our church family and discover a next step that will be a catalyst to grow in your faith. I look forward to seeing you there. Now, as you can tell, the parking construction is progressing. I'm excited to let you know that it's progressing so much faster than scheduled. Any day now, they will be opening our west lot and starting construction on our east lot. We will keep you informed when that happens, but we need your help to do that. We will use text messaging to keep you informed of urgent or timely information. Now, if you did not get our last text message, then that means that we do not have your cell phone number. They are showing a QR code here. Now, take out your phone and with your camera app, point it to the screen and click the URL to update your profile in our system so you can stay informed with urgent and timely information. You may also update your profile on our app. We are preparing for Easter weekend, and there are 3 big things you need to know to make this happen. First, we are partnering with First United Methodist Church and Wallula Christian Church to serve all the school staff of the Lansing School District. We will be providing breakfast for them on April 3rd. We need you to sign up and prepare a breakfast food or to serve on the morning at a school building. Please join in and let's show our gratitude and support to the Lansing School District staff. Second, we're joining several churches in Leavenworth County for a Good Friday service on April 18 at 6:30 p.m. This will be held at the Lansing Middle School Auditorium. We hope you and your family can be there as we reflect and worship with the Big C Church in this very special way. And now last, we will have 5 Easter services on Easter weekend. I am looking forward to celebrating the resurrection of Jesus with all of you. I believe this Easter weekend is going to be an amazing weekend. We will be having baptisms at every service. So if you've received Jesus as your Savior and confessed Him as your Lord and not been baptized in water after coming to faith in Him, then this is your next step, and we want to celebrate that with you. Register to be baptized today on our app or website, or let us know if you have questions. Now, I know God has been moving in many hearts and lives inside our church family and outside our church family. And we believe God is going to use Easter weekend to do something big, and here's how you can be a part of something big on this Easter weekend. Come one, serve one, invite someone. Come to one of our 5 services. We will have 2 services on Saturday at 5 and 6:30 p.m., and we will have services on Sunday at our normal Sunday times. Next, serve at one of our services. It takes over 100 people to come together and make 5 services happen, and we need you to step in and serve. And last, invite someone. And here's who you can invite. Someone who uses the word not while talking with you. If they say not, then this is a trigger for you to invite them. If they say, I'm not ready for this, or I'm not from around here, then they are someone you should invite to join you for a service. We've given you an invite card on your seat to give to someone. We also have digital resources on our app or website for you to save and share with others. You may also sign up to serve through our app or website too. Now, if everyone does one of these 3 things, can you imagine what God will do on April 19 and 20? I can't wait to see that. Now, I told you that I was excited for you today, and here's why. You are about to hear from my friend Lance Kaufman, who is the lead pastor at Wallula Christian Church. He is one of the best storytellers I know, and he is one of the most faithful pastors I've been able to have as a friend. We are privileged to have him with us as we continue in our series in the Gospel of Mark. I know that you will give him a big Westside welcome when the lights come up on him in a moment. So welcome to week 4 of Power.
We have never seen anything like this.
By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do these things?
He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him?
Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him.
Well, thanks so much. I'm excited to be with you again this year in this United as One movement and just so many good things that God is doing in and through churches in Leavenworth County. And so thank you for partnering with Wallula Christian Church and doing all that you do. Thanks for having me this morning. Grateful to be here. I think most of us are familiar with a March Madness going on right now. Now, it's been a little rough for our area schools, right? It's been a hard year, and maybe your bracket is broken from already those early departures by the local schools. But most of us know this NCAA basketball tournament going on, and we're keeping track of how our brackets look and what's happening there. Fewer of us are familiar with Madness, which is happening right now as well. The NCAA wrestling championships that are going on this month. In fact, last night was the championship matches, and there were some exciting things that happened in that match. One young man won a national title for the 5th year in a row. Now, I'm a preacher, so math isn't my strong point, but 4 years of college and 5 national championships. Hopefully that never happens again. These crazy COVID rules that allow that stuff to happen. Another major upset to end that tournament last night. So exciting things with Madness. I didn't grow up wrestling. I wasn't familiar with that. My son got involved in wrestling many years ago in middle school and then into high school. And because I wasn't familiar with it, when I watched these matches, I was very much a non-participant. And maybe that's why he enjoyed it so much. I didn't have much to offer. There was no advice on moves or strategy or any of those things. I just didn't have any of that information. But I grew into a little bit of a wrestling fan, and I enjoyed going to those matches. And one thing stood out to me more than anything, though, and that is the truth that wrestling parents, nobody coaches from the stands like wrestling parents. They get so excited and they have so much encouragement that they want to offer their young athletes, and they will let them know as loudly and as energetically as they can from the stands. And in particular, there's something special. There's this transformation that takes place with wrestling moms. One moment, they will be as sweet and cuddly and just sweet as a dove. They're, Johnny, let me peel this orange slice for you, get you ready for your match. You need a little energy to get into this next match. And so I'll just peel this orange slice for you. And the next moment, when Johnny actually goes on that mat, they are expressing their desire for Johnny to win and sharing it with everyone around them. And that's transformation from let me peel this orange slice to shove his face into the mat. It's my favorite words of encouragement at wrestling tournaments, especially from wrestling moms. There's this radical transformation that takes place, and you as a wrestling parent, you really can't be a non-participant. You want to be involved and encourage your athlete to succeed, and these moms are transformed into that participant. Did you know that in the New Testament, that when the New Testament talks about spiritual warfare, it talks about wrestling? It uses that terminology. Most of the time when we think about spiritual warfare, this reality, there absolutely is a reality that the spiritual realm exists. And when it interferes or interjects or collides with the natural world, we tend to think of spiritual warfare as like an airstrike. You know, something that happens at a distance, and then we see it, and it goes away, But the New Testament doesn't talk about it in those terms. It talks about it in terms of hand-to-hand combat. It uses the language of wrestling. I think there's a story that highlights this for us more than any other in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. It's an interesting story, this encounter that Jesus has with a man who is overwhelmed spiritually by the darkness of spiritual warfare. The Gospel of Mark, it jumps right into the ministry of Jesus. There's a little information about John the Baptist, but man, we are right into Jesus teaching and preaching and healing. And it's not too many chapters into the Gospel of Mark that Jesus is really starting his teaching ministry. And he begins to try to lead and guide and disciple those closest to him as well as the crowds, and to teach them through these little stories that we call parables. And Jesus, I think, is getting a little frustrated, or maybe it's not Jesus so much as the crowds are beginning to get frustrated with these parables because they're struggling to understand exactly what Jesus means as he communicates through parables. And it gets to a point where Jesus said to his closest friends, this group of 12 disciples, look, guys, get into the boat. We're going to the other side of the lake. I mean, Jesus is just at a point where I think he needs a break from the crowds, from the teaching, and he says, get in the boat. We're going to the other side. And so the disciples get in. Jesus goes to the front of the boat. He quickly goes to sleep. He takes a nap. You got to love that about Jesus. He's napping on this boat in the middle of the trip. At some point anyway, a storm arises, and this storm is big, and it is causing problems. Remember that many of these disciples, the 12 closest to Jesus, are fishermen by trade. They would be used to being in a boat. They would be used to traveling on the Sea of Galilee, and so storms were not out of the picture for them. They've experienced this before, but this storm's so large that they are fearing for their life. They shake Jesus awake, and Jesus is sort of, I imagine, why are you waking me up? Why haven't you guys learned anything? And then he just hushes the sea, quiets the storm. And his disciples are looking around, and they're whispering to one another, who is this guy that even the wind and the waves obey him? I wonder how much of that trip was left. You know, it's about a 2.5-hour trip. I like to say it's a 3-hour trip across the Sea of Galilee, you know, from my childhood and an old TV show. And so this distance, it would have been a little longer because of the storm. But I wonder how much of the journey was left after the sea and the storm was quieted. I imagine Jesus goes back to the front of the boat, and he sort of lays down again, and he thinks he will finish the nap, and his disciples are commenting on what has happened and questioning who Jesus is. And I just love to imagine Jesus laying his head down again and thinking, you guys haven't seen anything yet. And when he sets shore on the other side of the sea, as soon as he steps out of the boat, he encounters this man who is running at him. I suppose that Jesus and his disciples, they heard the man before they saw him. This guy who has been chained up and locked up in the cemetery that they land on, this 2.5-3-hour journey that has now grown into maybe 4 or 5 hours. You can go back and sort of backtrack and realize that Jesus would have set shore on the other side of the Sea of Galilee at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night or even midnight. So there he is, stepping out of the boat at midnight in a cemetery. I mean, this is the stuff of ghost stories. And then he hears it, the clanging of chains as this guy runs toward him. Now understand, don't picture in your mind like the chariots of fire in this graceful, majestic run. This guy is going nuts. He's been chained up. He's beaten himself. He's cut himself with rocks. His clothes have disintegrated from the beatings and the weather and everything else. This naked man with chains clanging, maybe that's what they heard first. Or perhaps they just heard the pounding of his footsteps on that beach. Or maybe they heard the grunts as he worked so hard to get near Jesus. Or maybe the man was screaming as he ran, drawing the attention of Jesus and his disciples, because when he drew near to Jesus, he fell at his feet and he began to say, "What are you doing here, Jesus? Son of the Most High God, why are you bothering me? What do you want with us?" And Jesus, I think, looking into the heart of this man, trying to get past sort of the spiritual darkness, trying to reach that individual, he looks at that man, he said, "What's your name?" But it's not the man who responds, but the demons possessing him who say, "Legion, for we are many." It wasn't one demon that had control of this man, or two, or three, or even five, but I think hundreds or thousands of demons who have just overwhelmed him. And Jesus, having this conversation with the demons, they ask, what are you doing here? Please, have mercy on us. Don't send us out of the country. Look at these pigs over here, Jesus. Why don't you send us into them? And for whatever reason, Jesus relents. And he allows those demons to be transferred or to go into that herd of pigs. And the pigs, those demons run those pigs. They do what demons do, and they run those pigs over the cliff, plummeting to the death. Just one after another, just all that wasted bacon. Splash, splash, splash. Well, the folks in charge of those pigs, they've been paid to watch over them. They run back to town to talk to the owners of that drove of pigs. And can you imagine getting that knock on the door at 1 a.m? You got to come see this, guys. We did the best we can, but your pigs are gone. And so the owners and the rest of the townspeople, they come running out to see what they could see. And when they get to Jesus, they see two things. They see their livelihood decimated. And they see this guy who some of them have chained up. Some of them, they've all cast him aside and threw him out of the city, out of community. His own family have sent him away to live in these caves in the cemetery. They see that guy who had been naked, out of control. One preacher I heard tell this story. He called this man, I'm not sure if we're supposed to do this or not, but he called this man Crazy Harry. That's the kind of names the townspeople would have had for this guy. Just out of control, out of his mind, unable to control himself. And there they find Crazy Harry sitting at the feet of Jesus in his right mind. Once naked, now clothed, maybe in the cloak of Christ. They don't know what to do. The townspeople react in complete and utter fear. And they say, "Jesus, you've got to get out of here. We can't have you here. How are we going to make a living? What will you do next?" And as Jesus climbs into the boat, the man he's healed is begging him, "Let me go with you." But Jesus looks at the man. He said, "You can't come. I need you to stay right here. I want you to go back to your friends and your family in these 10 cities, and I want you to tell them the good things that God has done for you. I want you to tell them the mercy that God has shown you." And so they go in separate ways. Jesus back with his disciples into the Sea of Galilee, and now this man healed of his affliction. Demons chased out of his life. Totally and completely transformed. He becomes a missionary to this group of 10 cities. Man, Jesus totally and completely transforms. And the great news for us today is that it's not like Jesus totally and completely transforms once. That transformation available to this man in Mark chapter 5 is available to each one of us in Leavenworth County in 2025. Jesus totally and completely transforms. And I think that story in Mark chapter 5, the first 20 verses, teaches us 4 truths to how we can better understand that total and complete transformation. If you haven't yet, go ahead and turn in your Bibles to the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. That's just Matthew, Mark in your New Testament. The chapter number 5, we're going to deal with the first 20 verses as we work our way through these 4 truths. Truth number one is that Jesus will meet you where you are. Look at the first couple verses here in chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. And so Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee. And like we've sort of heard in the story, we think as we read through this a little bit and thought about that story, I'm not sure why Jesus makes this journey. Maybe he needed time away from the crowd surrounding him. Maybe he really was frustrated that his disciples didn't quite seem to get it yet. That frustration comes through, and when Casey shares the story about Jesus calming the storm, he's going to be able to explain sort of that frustration there that Jesus had with his disciples. Maybe he was just, he needed a break. I tend to believe that Jesus works with more purpose than that. I don't think he was only escaping the crowds or he only needed some rest. I think Jesus wanted to be in the middle of that storm so that he could calm it and show his power over nature to his disciples. I think Jesus wanted to be on the other side of the Sea of Galilee at midnight in a cemetery to meet that man. I think with total and complete purpose, Jesus goes and he finds this guy. And then Mark says, as Jesus stepped out of the boat, immediately they're met by this man. Mark loves this word immediately. As you read through the gospel, you'll find it over and over again. I think the very first place we read it is in Mark chapter 1, about verses 9 and 10. It's the scene of Jesus being baptized. And so Jesus comes to John the Baptist to be baptized. And as he's baptized and lifted out of the water, immediately Mark says that the heavens are torn apart. That Greek word is schizo, for torn apart. And it's a word that's used in the Greek, the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament that Jesus would have read. When you read notations from the Old Testament and the New Testament, you're reading notations, cites from the Septuagint. And that word that's used to describe in the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, the parting of the Red Sea, is that same Greek word, schizo. I mean, the parting of the Red Sea, that's a Sunday school story that sometimes we clean up. And I think sometimes we imagine that as sort of this gentle parting of the waters. But I think probably it was much more violent than that. Sort of the shoving apart or the tearing apart, the schizo of these waters for hundreds of thousands of Israelites to be able to cross through on dry ground. And I imagine it's easy when we think about the story of Jesus being baptized, that the sky is torn apart, heavens are torn apart, schizo, and it's kind of this gentle, the dove flies down. How much more gentle could that be? But I wonder if that dove made its way through sort of this thunderstorm type scene of those heavens being torn apart. Why was it so violent in my mind? Because this scene, this natural world is colliding with the unseen realm, the spiritual world. These two absolute realities are on this collision course. And it happens, I believe, at Jesus' baptism, and it happens, I believe, at every one of our baptisms, by the way. This collision that happens, the heavens being torn apart. And here in Mark chapter 5, we get the same kind of collision. Jesus steps out of the boat, and then what does verse 2 say? This man with an unclean spirit. These demons possessing him comes running at him. Verse 3 goes on to say he lived among the tombs and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. I think there's another word that I want to zero in on here. If we think about that word immediately in the first couple verses, and now in the next few verses, I circled in my Bible this little word afar. And not because I'm interested in how far the guy ran to meet Jesus. I mean, when you're shaped like me, you're interested in things like that. You know, like how far did he really have to run to meet Jesus? But I'm not so much interested in that physical distance. But did you catch the description of this guy? I mean, he's got these chains that are broken. Did you see that the townspeople, they'd wrapped him up, they'd chained him up in the cemetery in these caves. Nobody could subdue him. Did you catch that as well? Nobody could subdue him. Just keep that in the back of your mind. He's been chained up in these tombs, these caves, and everything that could happen to a person living months on end, exposed to the wind and the storms and everything out, living in a cave. Everything that you can imagine that could happen to a person has happened to this guy. I mean, there'd be no real protection from the weather. There'd be no source of sort of physical hygiene. There'd be no clean clothes. In fact, this guy's clothes have been torn apart as he's beat himself repeatedly and tried to cut himself with rocks. I think really what's going on in this guy's life, who is overwhelmed spiritually, is that as the demons break these chains with supernatural strength, and as they use that same supernatural strength to beat that guy, I think he's sort of trying to just get out of that situation, to just end it all. I think it's safe to say that this guy has tried over and over and over again to end his life as a source of relief to the spiritual trauma present in his life. Man, he just wants out. I don't know how you can describe somebody who's further away from Jesus. I mean, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what your spiritual life looks like. I don't know what your relationship with Jesus looks like. And you might be saying, Lance, it's different today. The kinds of choices that I've made, the sin that has been present in my life, I've made these choices maybe even in the last couple of weeks, in the last couple of months, that have started to unravel my life and the important relationships in my life, and I can see everything slipping away. And you're saying, Lance, you don't understand. You might be saying, Lance, you don't understand the decisions I made not just weeks ago or months ago, but years ago in the sin that I have battled against time and time and time again. And I've lost that battle more often than I've won. And you don't get, Lance, what's going on in my life and how far I am from God, and how could this Jesus want anything to do with me? And you know what? I might not be able to understand. Sometimes I struggle with that idea in my own relationship with Jesus. Why is he so patient? Why is he giving me another chance? But here he is in the life of this guy, completely overwhelmed spiritually. I mean, you cannot get further away from Jesus than Crazy Harry chained up in the cemetery. And yet here Jesus is, stepping into his life. He'd already started that conversation. He was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Man, Jesus will meet you where you are. It's truth number one. Let's think about truth number two, that the enemy's only goal is destruction. Look at verse 9. And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Again, I think that Jesus is trying to reach into, through that spiritual debris in this man's life, to kind of his heart, to his soul, to his spirit, however you want to think of it. He's looking, as I imagine, into the eyes of this man, completely overwhelmed spiritually. He's saying, "What's your name?" But it's only the demons who respond. And they say Legion. Legion would be a description of this military unit that would include somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers. Now, I'm not sure if there were 4,000 to 6,000 demons possessing this man, but there was more than enough. He was completely overwhelmed. And these demons begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. This is the second signal that they give us, that they know sort of the hierarchy in place here. They know that they are going to lose this wrestling match with Jesus, that there's no victory for them. The first is that they recognize Jesus as the Son of the Most High God. And the second is that they say, don't send us out of the country. Don't send us too far. When Luke shares this story in the Gospel of Luke, he says that the demons say, don't send us into the abyss. There's lots of discussion about where demons come from and what they look like. I'll just follow along with Peter when he talks about demons in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. And he says, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. Peter's kind of reaching back to this idea that maybe you've heard that Satan rebelled against God, and Satan took this army of angels with him, and that God cast them onto the earth, that he has this plan to send them to the pit of hell for all of eternity. That's the abyss, and that's why these demons say, don't send us too far out of this country. In other words, don't send us to our eternal destiny yet. Now, I don't know. When you hear things like that, I don't know if you say, wait a minute. Right? Can this really be true? I just read a book about spiritual warfare, and I'm not sure I'm ready to suggest this book for your reading or not, but there was an interesting example that the author used. He described people today, and not one particular generation, but just sort of all of us, he described as disciples of the internet. He said there's so much information at our fingertips at all time. Have you ever experienced this? You heard one week, eggs aren't good for you, don't eat eggs. And then the next week you read, eggs are really beneficial for your health. You need to include eggs in your diet. And then the next week you read, there's no way you can afford eggs. Right? There's just all of this information coming at us over and over and over again. And we want to fact check. We want to verify everything out there. I don't suppose I'm the only one who's read something recently and thought, can that really be true? How do I know? How do I figure out if this is really true? And I think sometimes in these spiritual battles, when this unseen spiritual realm collides with this natural world around us, we want to fact check it. We want to know, is this really, really true? I just want you to think with me about the possibility that, man, that is really going on around us. I'm going to share a personal story that's embarrassing to me, all right? I'm embarrassed to admit it because it shows my flaws, certainly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share it, though. I don't want to be... When I was a younger preacher and my kids were younger, I was accused of telling too many stories about my kids. And now I'm getting older, and I don't want to be a preacher accused of telling too many stories about my physical ailments. All right, I don't think I'm quite at that age yet. And I want to stand off and wait as long as I can for that accusation to come. But I deal with this physical ailment, and it's just an old fat man malady. And I understand that I've pretty much gotten to be an old fat guy all on my own. All right, I take full responsibility for this. I know there are better decisions I could have made and can make. All that to say, I just deal with this old fat guy ailment. And I read recently a biography of Martin Luther, and it said that Martin Luther had gout. That's the ailment I'm going to share with you in a minute. I have some bouts with gout once in a while. But if Martin Luther had it, I think basically, he and I are the same. That's what I want you to take away from this. But I have this gout, and the gout flares up. It's in your joints, and it makes joints hurt, and sometimes it's hard to walk. And, it's in the right joint and all those things. And we were on vacation, last few days of vacation. I started to experience some of these flare-ups, took some medicine, and we were heading home, and I thought, man, this is going to be okay. I've got this beat. We're going to be ready to go for the weekend. Sunday's looking good. And then yesterday, Saturday, right, it was so painful. I mean, I'm just limping around. It's hard for me to move. And I know that I've made poor choices and all those things, and there's natural reasons that disease and gout occurs, right? But my question is, why on Saturday? Right? Why do I think when I'm feeling better and I'm ready to go, and I've got this important date with Westside Leavenworth Church, why on Saturday am I distracted by this pain in my knee? And I'm worried that when I stand up, I'm going to be limping around, and everybody's going to look at this old fat guy and think, what in the world does this guy have to offer? He can't even walk. I mean, those are the ideas, the thoughts, the lies, the temptation that the enemy uses. I get that I'm a little more sensitive to this too as a preacher, and we've had our fair share of snowstorms and ice this last winter, and I know it didn't always snow on Saturday night, but man, it seems like it always snows on Saturday night. I just wonder why on Saturday night. The enemy will use any foothold possible to distract you, to lead you away from Jesus, to destroy in your life. He will destroy through the lies he tells you. He will destroy through the temptation in your life. He will destroy, like in Mark chapter 5, and this spiritual battle that goes on around us. And so these demons, they begged him to not send us out of the country. Verse 11, now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. I don't know how many demons there were for each pig, but there was enough that as soon as they entered these pigs, the demons did what demons do, and they destroyed this herd of pigs. The livelihood of that town is wiped out. Man, demons, the only goal of the enemy is destruction. The herdsmen in verse 14 fled and told it to the city and the country, and the people came to see what had happened, and they came to see Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. So the owners of the pigs come out, and they see their livelihood destroyed, and they see this guy who had been naked and beat up, now sitting there at the feet of Jesus in his right mind, maybe clothed in the very cloak of Jesus. And they're overwhelmed by fear. And they say, Jesus, you've got to get out of here. You've got to get out of here. Man, the enemy he loves to destroy, and that's what he's all about. That's truth number 2. Truth number 3 is that Jesus will never force himself on you. And so when they suggest to Jesus, you've got to leave, we get to verse 17, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from the region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And so Jesus, I read one author who described Jesus as a gentleman because he'll never force himself on you. I want you to know that Jesus will never, fight and claw his way into your heart. But just know today, this is your invitation to say yes to Jesus today. You have the opportunity to climb into the boat with Jesus, to be in relationship with him. Man, he was offering you this opportunity. I remember the first time that I decided, man, I really need to follow Jesus, and I thought I need to be baptized. It was this cold February Sunday in this little church that I grew up in, and it was the kind of church that no matter what the sermon was about, and no matter who was in the audience, that after the end of that sermon, there was always going to be an invitation to come forward and to give your life to Jesus. We're going to sing this song, and you just walk forward. And that's what happened at the end of this message. I don't remember what the message was about, but I remember sitting there on the third row on the left-hand side. That's where my parents always sat, third row, left-hand side. And it was not a long walk, just 3 rows of chairs. But I was working up enough courage until finally I mustered the courage, and I stood up, and I kind of stumbled across my parents, and they're like, what's going on? And I walked forward, and I sat on that front row, and the preacher came to meet me, and he said, Lance, what are you doing? And I said, I need to be baptized today. And the preacher said, oh man, that's such a great decision, and we want to do that, but I need to talk to you about it. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, he didn't have a theological conversation. He didn't have any doctrine he wanted to cover. He didn't address, sin in my life. He just said, well, it's really cold outside, and I didn't turn on the heater today in the baptistry. That water is going to be really cold. And I was just thinking about how hard it was to walk those 3 rows of chairs. And I thought, no, it needs to be today. And I've never considered this, that maybe that poor preacher, he didn't want to get in the water with me. But I said, no, I really think it needs to be today. And he relented, and he said, okay. And we went in the water, and he lowered me under, and he raised me up, and he baptized me. And that water was freezing cold. And I remember getting out of the water and just shivering. And I'm not sure today, to this day, if it was the Holy Spirit or, the cold of the water. But I was sort of shivering. And in any event, on that day, I said yes to Jesus. This is your invitation. I don't know how far the run is for you. I don't know how many rows of chairs you'll have to cover. But today is the day you can say yes to Jesus. Talk to somebody you've seen on stage. Sign up to be a part of those baptisms on Easter Sunday. Man, how cool is that? Get in on that. Say yes to Jesus. On that day when we remember the victory, the historic event that changes all of eternity. Man, say yes to him on that day in baptism. How cool is that? Talk to somebody you've seen, the person who invited you this morning. Make today the day when you say yes to him. Jesus will never force himself on you, rather. That's truth number 3. Truth number 4 is that you're exactly where Jesus needs you. Verse 18, as Jesus starts to get into the boat, that man tried to go with him. As he was getting in the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and family and tell how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. I struggle with this scene because here Jesus has healed. He's totally and completely transformed this man's life. And man, the man wants to go with Jesus. He said, Jesus, let me go. And maybe it's because that guy is a little afraid that if he doesn't stay really close to Jesus, those demons might come back. Or maybe his life has just been so transformed by Jesus that he wants to serve him with all of his might. But I tend to think that the reason Jesus says, no, I need you to stay, is because somewhere deep inside of this man, he doesn't really believe that those folks in town who have chained him up over and over and over again, that he doesn't really believe that his family who finally threw him out and said, you got to go live somewhere. I don't care where it is, but you can't stay here. That he doesn't really believe those townspeople who came out and were more concerned about the herd of pigs than himself sitting at the feet of Jesus. That he doesn't really believe that they believe his transformation. That he's made new. And Jesus said, I need you to go convince them. I want you to go and I want you to tell them the good things that God has done for you. I want you to go and I want you to tell them the mercy that God has shown you. Ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, if you have an answer to those two questions, if you can articulate the good things that God has done for you, if you can say out loud in your heart and in your mind the mercy that Jesus has shared with you, then you are equipped to be a missionary just like this man in Mark chapter 5. Do you know what happened when he went into those 10 cities and he started to share the difference that Jesus made in his life with others? Man, their lives were transformed. We know it when Jesus comes back to this area. Remember, when he set sail from one side of the Sea of Galilee to another in Mark chapter 5, that he's met by one crazy guy. When he comes back, he's met by this crowd of people that are doing everything they can to get their sick and their hurt to come to Jesus. They know the difference that Jesus can make in their life. I love this partnership with United as One and churches in Leavenworth County. And from where I sit, and you can take this with a grain of salt, but from where I sit, there is one great hurdle left for this United as One movement. And that hurdle is the unleashing of this army of missionaries. Folks, if you have an answer to the good things that God has done for you, if you have an answer for the mercy that Jesus has shown in your life, there is no excuse for the parents on your kids' ball team to not know how good God has been to you. There's no excuse for those folks on your bowling team to not know the mercy that Jesus has shown you. There's no excuse for your coworkers or your neighbors in your neighborhood to not know how good God is and how He has shared that goodness with you and how Jesus has shared His mercy and His grace and His forgiveness and the total and complete transformation that you've participated in relationship with Him. Folks, we have the good news of Jesus. Please stop keeping it to yourself. Share it with those around you. Be a missionary just like this guy in Mark chapter 5 was a missionary, because Jesus totally and completely transforms. A couple years ago, I was invited by my son. He said, "Dad, the NCAA wrestling championships are in Kansas City." They were at the T-Mobile Center downtown Kansas City. He said, "We ought to go." And so we got tickets, sort of, to this event, and we saw the quarterfinals or whatever. There were all these wrestling matches. I say sort of because we were not on the very last row of the upper deck of this auditorium, but we were on the second to last row of the auditorium. We were barely in the place. And we were surrounded by these Penn State fans. And I was again amazed by the transformation that takes place. Because when Penn State wrestlers got on the mat and started to wrestle, those Penn State fans couldn't help themselves as they shouted words of encouragement in direction to those wrestlers. And again, as I'm still just kind of learning. I don't have advice to offer. I'm a non-participant in that wrestling crowd, watching these folks shout these direction to these wrestlers. And I thought, man, are you crazy? There's no way they can hear you. And what's more, I thought, these folks, some of them are Olympic gold medalists. You know, they are at the highest level of the wrestling championship world. They do not need your help. And yet there they were screaming these words of encouragement. Now, I suppose it's okay at a wrestling event or at a concert or at some kind of ball game to be a non-participant as we watch the action go on in the field. But when we've been totally and completely transformed by Jesus, we have no excuse for not getting in the game. Jesus totally and completely transforms. Would you pray with me? Father God, we love you so much, and we thank you for being a big God. We love you for sending Jesus into this world, for the difference that Jesus made, for his choice to go to the cross, God. I'm so thankful that his story doesn't end on the cross or in the grave, that on that third day he rose from the dead. And man, that changes everything. And when we say yes to Jesus, when we start a relationship with you, he moves into our life and he cleans us out. Just like that man in Mark chapter 5 was cleaned out from the inside out. Jesus does the same thing in our lives. Thank you for making a difference in our lives, for completely and totally transforming us. God, help us now. Help us now as your disciples, as your followers, as your sons and daughters, heirs to your kingdom, completely and totally transformed. Help us share that story with others. We love you, and we thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Lance. Let's stand and worship together.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still, every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will pray. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is life, forever lifted high. And your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, 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 Jesus. And your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is life, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. And your name is life, Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Those that have come prepared to give today, our ushers will now be making their way forward. I know a name that can silence roaring waves. I know a name that can empty out a grave. And I know a name, it's the only name that saves, and it's worthy of all praise. I call you Jesus, I call you healer, risen and reigning in power. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call you Jesus, I call you Savior, worthy of glory forever. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call your name, I have a king with dominion over that. He holds the keys in his holy nail-scarred hands. He is the heel that has crushed the serpent's head. Our resurrected great I am. I call you Jesus, I call you healer, risen and reigning in power. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call you Jesus, I call you Savior, you're worthy of glory forever. Something comes out of the grave. Every time I call your name. So where, oh death, is now your sting, and where, oh grave, your victory? Where, oh death, is now your sting, and where, oh grave, your victory? Oh, where, oh death, is now your sting, and where, oh grave, your victory? I call you Jesus, Every time I call your name, the gates of hell shake. Every time I call your name, chains break, dry bones lay. Every time I call your name, the gates of hell shake. Every time I call your name.
Well, my friends, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. This was a beautiful day, and one of the things that I heard Lance say, and I want to echo this, is that regardless of your past, your present, or your perceived future prospects, Jesus will meet you where you are. And if today is the day that, like Lance took a small little walk to come up and say, I'm ready to surrender my life to Christ and I'm ready to follow him, if today is that day for you, today, I don't want you to, if you're feeling that in your gut and feeling that in your soul, today, that's the Holy Spirit talking. That's not the enemy, my friends, who's saying, come see Jesus. So we want to celebrate that with you. So come on forward. We've got prayer partners who are available to pray with you. I'll be around up here if you want to talk. But friends, today, don't let it miss. Don't let it go by. If today is the day for you to take a courageous walk into relationship with Jesus. I love you, Westside. We'll see you next week. Bye now.